Recording started.
Hello, everybody. I want to welcome you this week to the Matrexit discussion group call for tactical sovereignty. And this week I've got something, I've been sitting on it for a few years, and I didn't really know when to present it. After a couple weeks ago, it was 2 weeks ago, I did Realms, the Seen and the Unseen. And I was showing a comparison with the Babylon Working Project by Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard in the desert. And joined in and combined with what was happening many years earlier with the relationship between John Dee and Edward Kelly. And after doing that, I thought, this might be a good time to get into this episode talking about cults, because many of us are in a cult of some type or another without even realizing it. And I think probably the reason for that is because of what we think of as cults. A lot of us have our own preconceptions or our own notions as to what a cult is, or, especially regarding, like, for instance, how it's defined. And so we think, oh, it's really easy to make sure that you don't get into a cult, because, as long as you don't find yourself around a cauldron, stirring a witch's brew, you're safe. And that's not really the case. And I think with anything, we've all really learned that the most important thing we can do is go to definitions and really find out what things are, and find out that they're not really defined by what we learned from cartoons or television or comic books, whatever the case may be. So I like to always go to Merriam-Webster's 1828 dictionary when I go to definitions. And I'll say at the same time, I have a lot of people also contact me and they're like, hey, Brian, what do you think the best legal dictionary is to use? Should I use Valentine's, or should I use Black's Law, or, some of these others? Even Webster's has a legal dictionary. And I think what matters when it comes to, like, legal definitions and you're looking for the correct dictionary, there isn't really one general correct dictionary. Myself, I prefer to stick with the Black's Law 4th edition, and I don't really go past that. I'll look at maybe earlier editions, but I really don't go past the 4th for various reasons. But I think the most important thing to really pay attention to when you're looking at definitions on different writings, for instance, that you're reading, is that the only dictionary that's important is to find out the dictionary that the writer used, or whoever the lawmakers were, or whether it was Supreme Court. Look and find what dictionary they follow, and that's where you want to search the definitions of the terms that they're using. So that's the most important step, rather than picking out of the countless other dictionaries or the other 11, 12, whatever editions of Black's that there is. It's more important to know what the writer intended. But just in general, I like using Merriam-Webster's 1828. And that's what I'm going to go to here when we're looking at cults, as opposed to the single word occult, which is really just means hidden. If something is occulted, it's in hiding, or it's kind of behind the scenes. But as far as a cult itself goes, those are really just sects or groups of people. And according to Merriam-Webster's, it starts out with what a lot of people most commonly will think of. Number one was a religion regarded as unorthodox, or a body of adherents. And I think it's the second half of part one that people don't pay attention to, because as a lot of us will think of it as a religion regarded as unorthodox, that means it's a religion that we think is kind of weird or sketchy or strange or something like that. And that's normally where everybody stops at. But the second half of number one says, or a body of adherents. which is a body of people that adhere to certain principles or adhere to a particular doctrine or philosophy or dogma. Okay. Number two in their definitions is great devotion to a person, a movement, or idea using rituals, a dogma set by a leader. And number two there in the definitions, I think, is something we really got to pay attention to when we're trying to look at whether or not you're involved with a cult of some type, a group, whether or not it would be designated as a cult, because the Merriam-Webster's definitions there give us the principles that we need to look for. And there's three main elements to cults. Number one is that they will have a leader. And this leader is normally very charismatic. They may have a good speaking ability. They just may have a way about them that draws people to them. But there's going to be a leader. And then under that leader, very often there'll be some other type of hierarchy. Other people that are in charge of different facets of the group, for instance. So number one in their elements is a leader. Number two in the elements is the doctrine. Like in Merriam-Webster's, it referred to a dogma or somebody being an adherent. They've got a doctrine, and a doctrine can also be looked at as like maybe a purpose. There's something behind this group, something that they are trying to push. So the first two were one, a leader, two, a doctrine that you ascribe to. Number three is membership. And that's always a very interesting one, because it's like they have to pull you in and make you a part of what they're doing. They've got to make you have kind of a dog in a hunt or something like that. I think of the fallen angels, for instance, and that story, where it was kind of where we go one, we go all, we're all in this together, and we're going to back each other up behind this thing that we want to do. And within the membership, there's also a method of becoming a member, of course. If it's something as simple as paying a $5 a month due or something like that, like you do on Patreon, no, you're not really in a cult there, okay? Because within this method for a cult, what they're normally going to have is some sort of document or whatever that you have to be an adherent to, that you have to ascribe to. And this goes back to element number two, their doctrine. Whatever document that is going to involve whatever doctrine that they're trying to push. And another part of a cult that is very interesting, that lays within the membership idea, is that, is this a situation where if you choose that you no longer want to have anything to do with this, that you can just walk away free and clear, just like quitting shopping at one store and starting to go to another one now, and there's no difference, nobody says a word because of it, you know what I mean? Is it that kind of a situation? Or is the membership tied up in such a way that if they don't feel that you're following this doctrine that they ascribe to or that they push or have you actually sign on to, can they remove you? Is there a removal process that doesn't involve your free will? If that's the case, yeah, you're definitely part of some sort of a cult. And like I said, and it showed in the definitions, not all cults have to be religious or around some spiritual theme. That's part of the stigmata in our head, I think, when we think of a cult, is that it's got to be something to do with a religion or a religious movement. But not all cults are religious. In fact, I would say most cults are not religious. The further you get into them, you will find that maybe there is some spiritual influences there, but on their face, that they're not religious. And religion is just another man-made idea anyway. It's a man-made concept. There was, let me say, with everything that I share, whether it's steps for a process or something like that, the only things I share or show are things that I actually have experience in, things that I know about. Because to me, I hear a lot of people talk about things, and in this recording I'm going to play for you, the first part of it, they're actually talking about how to remove a vehicle out of state jurisdiction or United States jurisdiction. That's what they're discussing. And you can tell when somebody doesn't have any experience in something because they will use words like, well, this should happen, or sometimes, or maybe. No, if you've done something and you know for a fact how it works, then you're going to speak matter of factly. That's just the way it is. And this particular group, like most cults, and I'm not necessarily picking on this particular group I'm going to play for you this evening, because I'm not coming out and saying absolutely automatically, without a shadow of doubt, that these are a cult. I'm saying this is the type of a cult format, just like saying something is a type of a corporate format. If you say something is a type of a corporate format, it doesn't mean it's a corporation. Not all corporate formats are corporations. A trust, a partnership, LLCs, those are all corporate structures. An organization, that's a corporate structure, but those things are not corporations. You know, corporate just means people that have come together for a single purpose. Gosh, that almost kind of sounds like the definition of a cult too, doesn't it? But like I said, these people will portray one thing when there's something else really lying underneath, lying in the background. And so, I appreciate that I had a chance to be a part of these people that I'm going to play for you and listen to some of the things that they were discussing, ideas that they were discussing. It kind of stretched my mind on a few things. And it really opened my eyes to a lot of other things as well, such as this idea regarding a cult. Now, in this recording, I've tried to mask points when a name for somebody was used, for the main reason that I'm not calling out or picking on any one person. I'm just showing the concept and the idea of the structure of what these things are. And like I said, with many of these groups, much like this one I'm going to show, they try to use the idea of private membership association behind them, and basically standing on the Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1 of the Contract Clause for the Constitution, which states that no state may impair the obligation of a contract. So if you bring everybody together under contract, they all become part of your group / cult. Now, the philosophy would be that the state cannot interfere, which is true for the most part. We also have to know, though, that protection only stays there as long as there's no nefarious acts or crimes taking place. If that occurs, then no, you don't have those protections under the contract clause. All right. I want to play this for you, and I may pause it a time or two, but I'm pretty much going to let it play. And one of the things that I want you to pay attention to is the way they are when they're just talking, when they're just chatting. Because when they're just chatting, they've got one tone to their voice, and it's just a normal, everyday, as you talk to your friend kind of tone. You know what I mean? And then they bring up the situation with me. And to give you some background on how this all occurred, really briefly before I start this. And I'm sorry, I don't like when people do big intros to a topic because a lot of times it's not needed. In this situation, though, it really is needed to be able to help you wrap your mind around what is going on here while you're listening to this. Because oh, when I was with this group, everything was kind of cool. They were all, trying to do this and influence the state and influence people one way or another. And then they would have their regular meetings on Monday night. They probably still do. And I'd listened to them for several weeks. And then all of a sudden, one week, their air quotes leader says, Brian Parker, I see you've been here a few times. There's something we can help you with, something we can, explain to you. And I said, no, I just have this playing in the background Monday nights. I'm just kind of listening in and seeing what there is to learn. And so he went into his whole regular spiel of how they got started and what they're about and all that kind of stuff. And after that, just kind of continued like normal. Um, I did do like a declaration when I joined in with them, and that was it. Everything else that they had and that they were promoting were all money making schemes. And people know me, I don't pay money for hardly anything. The only thing I do spend money on is books, and especially hard to find books, because that's where you're going to get your best knowledge or your best intelligence at, are the hard to find books. And I just sat back for a year and a half or so, just watching people feeding so much money into this and getting nowhere within this group. And they even came to me at one point and asked me if I would head up something for Florida, which I agreed to. Um, and then that kind of was going nowhere because the people that were part of it with me at the head uh, wanted to have their meetings like on Tuesday afternoon. I was like, sorry, I'm working. It's the work week. Let's do it on the weekend. Oh, no, we're out at the pool with our friends or we're at the beach with our kids. And no, we don't want to take up our time with this on the weekends. And it's like, okay, so there's going to be no way then for me to have the meetings that were necessary with them. And one Monday night, we had a regular meeting. And then on Wednesday, they would normally do their regular YouTube. And he did a YouTube just totally excoriating tactical sovereignty. And I was like, wow, where did this come from out of the blue? You know? And next thing I knew, they were giving me the boot. I'm like going, okay, this is funny, because there was all sorts of claims being made, claims that I had signed up under the FCC, which I have no idea how anyone would even do, and that I had even registered my legal person with the SEC, the Security and Exchange Commission. And it's like, what in the world are you talking about? Is if you're making claims like this, we know the person making the claims, they're liable to show their evidence. And there was no evidence being shown. In fact, there was never a time, even in the beginning, where they said, hey, we hear this or we hear that. Can you answer for this or explain this to us? Is this true? At even which time, well, they didn't do it because they know I would have said, okay, well, where did you hear it from? Show me your evidence. And there is none. It never existed. You can't prove a negative, right? But I'm not really sure what the whole anger issue is or was with them. But you'll notice in the conversation, and you notice this, there's a lot of different things like assemblies and things like that out there. And I see them from time to time go and kick people out or whatever for whatever reason. And when this occurs and you're listening to their tone, all of a sudden you start hearing this narcissistic tone and this narcissistic verbiage coming from them. They say things like, we told you not to do that, and you went and did it anyway. Well, number one, nobody should be telling you what you can and cannot do with your personal life. And they'll say things like, you're not educated enough, or you're lacking knowledge. Very often you're going to hear also, you don't understand. We're just trying to help you. I mean, that's narcissistic term right out of 101, first page. I'm just here to help you. I'm trying to help you. That you're hurting yourself by not letting me help you. So those are the things to listen to within these groups and when certain situations arise, because your chances are not going to experience any of those things firsthand while you're with whatever organization you're with, but you're going to hear them do that with other people. And when you're hearing them do that with other people, you should really know that it's only a matter of time until, guess what? It's going to be your turn. And so it's good to recognize that and see and notice this other side of these organizations, because that'll start to point to what they're really about and what's really going on. All right. So let me see if I can get on with this and play this for y'all. And it's going to take it a few seconds here to kick in, but pay attention closely to those things that I mentioned and the way they talk with each other. And then when it comes to something that's rubbing them wrong.
Vehicles are MSOs, they're the manufacturer's statement of origin. Right. I believe, Johnny Rowe, that all the car dealers have to sign an agreement to get their license from the state to sell cars, that they have to agree to the OSD, the original stamp date of manufacturer. Yeah, not necessarily. What they do generally is they get a floor plan. The bank actually pays for the car, but they still belong to the company. The dealer sits over there on a blank title. And that car may be 5 years old when the original title is written. They don't have a title until after they're sold. And the reason they want we take them out of their database is so that they won't have the liability of the car being damaged over here, and they still have it in their database.
Actually, let me pause it right there. They said that vehicles don't have a title until they're sold. I don't know how many of the people that are listening to this are a part of my group, Tactical Sovereignty. In fact, it's not even my group, it's our group. It's just a place where I put my research so everybody could kind of follow along while I was looking. But when I was going over the situation with split title with vehicles, with the manufacturer's statement or certificate of origin, and then the other title is the certificate of title that you have in your glove box. I've shown pictures in dealerships of a table full of MSOs or MCOs. So yeah, there's a title that already exists long before that vehicle's sold. So anyway, moving ahead.
Technically, it's their property still. That's why you have to have a tag on it. Title comes in where you register it, what jurisdiction, because you get a title from the registrar. How long does it take to get that title? It depends on a lot of things. For you, 10 months. Next year, we make it 12. That's why I keep my mouth shut and check my email 10 times a day and just wait. Yeah.
Remember what I said about when people don't know a process because they've never personally done it? That right there is a perfect example. How long does it take for us to get this title back? Well, maybe 10 days for you. Oh, well, it might take 10 months for you. It depends on a lot of things, the one gentleman says. That's funny. Depends on a lot of things. No, it doesn't work that way. if you're going to get something, I'm sure everybody's titled their vehicle. They know exactly how it works. It's a bang, bang, bang situation.
I promise you, if I hadn't counted on mine, there's no way more than anybody else's. Ain't nothing to do but check it.
Okay, all right, here. This is the committee. Motion to basically classify Brian Parker's person as an infiltrator.
Motion on the floor. Do I hear a second? Second. Okay, motion is second. Do I hear any objections? If you have any objections, speak up now or forever hold your peace. Hearing no objections, motion carries.
This is Kelly Christensen. Oh, don't apologize. I joined in to hear what they had to say about you and David Williams. They slandered the both of you pretty badly. I can already tell what's going to happen to T-Row. When they try to use their goddamn knowledge for all my messages, they're going to need Tim Turner in person.
David Williams was the one that went on Maniac with his video camera on, right?
Kelly Christensen, I've been watching these guys people themselves in prison for 18 years. Nothing has changed.
Was it David Williams that went on Maniac on the live cam without him knowing?
All you can say right now is this. Kelly Christensen, if you're listening, and Brian Parker, if you're listening, go back to high school, guys. You're at the grown-up table. Go back to high school. You have no idea what the hell we're talking about.
Is that what the 25th Heroes about? Was all Brian Parker?
No.
Oh,
I said two things about Brian Parker. The rest of it was about David. And the fact that Brian Parker was freaking promoting David Williams, who was a freaking international criminal.
Oh, okay. I haven't had a chance to watch it, and I got on the show about a half hour late.
And we see the numbers that they get on their freaking show. It's nothing. Maybe 6 people, maybe. So, Kelly,
David Williams was the one that threatened his wife on live camera. Is that the same guy?
No. This is another guy.
No, David Johnson. That guy's wild psycho on camera.
That's David Johnson. God damn. It's David Johnson.
I can do some research before you start asking those kind of questions. It's all there.
Because basically, he comes on all covertly. We're going to see what we're going to do. This is high school, guys. That's 9th, 10th grade shit.
They can pay.
We're going to see what he's going to say about it. And they're going to go out to jail. And they're going to do this, they're going to do that. Do you have any idea how many contacts we have? Any idea? Go over to LinkedIn, dumbass. I'm talking to Kelly right now and Brian. Go to LinkedIn.
Does that have any idea who those contacts are?
No idea whatsoever. Freaking idiots. Idiots.
They probably wouldn't even be able to stand up if they saw this to some of the people we have on contact. People that have actually declared their residency here.
That's freaking stupid, man.
Just beyond that, just here.
I don't know, but I know I talked to that man on the phone for a couple of hours, I think about a year ago. And he's pretty psycho.
David Williams?
Yes, the one that you're talking about.
Yeah, okay, so basically this is what's going to happen so everybody knows, okay? Brian Parker and David Williams, Parker, because that's the man's real name, by the way, they only get one T-row. That's it. We'll never talk about you again. They only get one T-row. We warned you, and you freaking went and did it. Anyways. And we've told people this all the time. All we said was it was on the friggin', Tactical Softy bullshit group on Facebook. And we asked you not to use the birth certificate, authentication, and all this other stupid shit. Dear Brian, if you're still on the call and you haven't run already, did you tell anybody that you've already in 2018 registered your person as an LLC with the SEC? Did you tell anybody that? No, you didn't. You lied to everybody. That you authenticated your freaking birth certificate and then you registered your person as an LLC with the SEC.
You then came over here and lied again when you took your oath.
We haven't even gotten close to the amount of lies we have on you, buddy. We were being nice to you. Little weasel son of a bitch.
So in essence, he was taking his person and signing in as the governor with it.
Yes.
Okay.
He registered his person as an LLC over with the FEC and didn't say one thing to anybody he was in social compact with. So he took the office of the governor, of the national governor of the state of Florida, and transferred it over to the company and then registered it over there.
All right, take a pause there. One of the last statements there was that I registered my legal person as an LLC. I'm not even sure if anybody can do that. And anybody that knows me and that's ever talked to me looking for advice or anything, even in regular everyday life, I do not recommend anybody do an LLC. And there's a very good reason for not doing an LLC. And the reason why is because if you have an LLC and somebody comes and wants to bring an action against you, you cannot present or even represent yourself in court. You have to have hired an attorney to do that for you. You can't do it yourself. And so I never recommend anybody do an LLC. So therefore, I would definitely never do it myself. On top of that, I just think it's interesting, we told you not to do that. They don't tell me what I can and can't do. Nobody does. In fact, they never even did. It's always been my business as to who I interview here on Tactical Sovereignty on the Matrexit discussion group call. And it'll always be that way. There's some people that afterwards, I kind of wonder if I should have really interviewed them or not. But even when I did have David Williams on, David Williams never promoted his organization or what he tries to sell or turn people on to. That was never even a topic of discussion. And in fact, this discussion even that he's referring to here that I had with David Williams here on Tactical Sovereignty, we were talking about nuclear warfare because he had a history of that in the military and knew about it. And so we were discussing the viability of that. That's all it was about. So nobody was promoting anything whatsoever. But this really isn't even the point. The point here is looking at one of the main factors, overruling factors that you're going to find in an organization like this is the element of control. They want to have control over everybody in there. And every now and then they might exercise that control on one member or another just to kind of show their big stick that they're carrying to all the other members. That way everybody else, totes the line and does what they want them to do. So yeah, I find that really, really interesting. Yeah, I love watching human behavior. To me, it's something that's just fun. I remember when I was younger, one of the things I used to enjoy doing was smoking a J and sitting in the mall and just watching people. I think people watching can be fascinating. You learn so much about people through different things that they do. And here, let me kick this back on. I don't think there's a whole lot of this left. The interesting thing is that this came at the end of their weekly assembly meeting. And so at the end of the weekly assembly meeting, which there would be anywhere from 30. Here later on in this, I think they say 70 people. I always saw like around 50. And one of the things that piqued my interest in a few short months was that I knew they had been around for a while, but why are they always staying around 35, 45, maybe 55 people? By now, they should have a few hundred people joining in with them. Why isn't that the case? If what they're doing and what they're pushing is so powerful. And as far as the authentication of well, he says birth certificate, that's not the case. It's the authentication of the certificate of live birth is what you use. And I had done that long before I even knew the name of any of these people. The names that you have heard mentioned, the reason why they weren't bleeped out was because those aren't people that are members of their organization, like Kelly Christensen or David Williams or David Johnson. Those people have nothing to do with them, so that's fine. But you notice that these people within the organization talking don't call each other by name on their recording. Why is that? Don't you think that's kind of curious? All right. I don't know. I may have dropped this. I think I did drop it off, but that's okay. That's probably a good place to stop that recording at anyway. These are things to pay attention to. And I think the portions that you heard there were loaded with the things that I brought up, like looking for these signs of narcissism. Later on in that recording, he goes on to talk about how, we're just trying to help you. You got to do it. You got to do what we tell you to. We're here for you. You won't let us help you. Those are just narcissistic behavior 101. And if you run into that in any of the types of groups or assembly or whatever things you're involved with, you need to let those things make your ears perk up a little bit to see what's going on, because those elements are nothing but control mechanisms. And everybody is going to be trying to use various, control mechanisms. I think I've got something in the chat. Let me just take a quick peek here. Let's see if it was a question or something, but I don't know. I don't think it's letting me go to chat. So be it. I will unmute everybody. So if there's a question or anything like that, you can feel free to ask. And so if you don't want to be unmuted, make sure that you mute yourself back out when I do the unmuting here in a second. Otherwise, on these calls, we can pretty much hear everything going on. We can hear your neighbors argue across the street. Believe me. I mean, you can hear a gnat fart on these things. So I'm going to unmute everybody. And like I said, go ahead and mute yourself back out if you don't want to be unmuted. But I know John had his hand up. I don't know if he had something he wanted to comment on, but you're unmuted, John.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So, I think I know who was the guy that was talking. Do you mind if I say the name? Because I have a question about the organization.
I'd prefer you don't, because this tonight really isn't about this organization in particular. But if you have a question about the organization, feel free to ask, and I'll tell you what I know.
Okay, so this guy that was talking is claiming that he claimed something that was abandoned for over 250 years, right? So I don't know, like, how valid is it to claim something that was abandoned 2.5 centuries ago?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the validity is. I mean, in the beginning there, what they're talking about is moving the title of property, specifically a vehicle, and moving out of state jurisdiction is what they're referring to. But also, that you bring up another good point right there, because there's a mention of moving someone's legal person from one venue to another.
Right.
And this was one of the first things that I noticed, in particular with these people, but I've also noticed it with many, many other organizations that you can find online that they do things what they call, status correction. Uh, I think everybody has the right status. The only problem is you're not using it correctly, and that what needs to be corrected is their presumption, because everything they're doing it under presumption of law, because their presumption is, well, I guess this is what it is. Nobody's clarified it either way to us. Well, what I say needs to be done is you correct that presumption so they don't have to operate under presumption of law anymore. But with the thing that I find really interesting, that touches on what you mentioned, was when these organizations are talking about doing something with your legal person, okay? In everyday life, there's something like that that can be seen. And that is when people go to court and they hire an attorney. If anybody's ever done that, unfortunately, if you look at that piece of paper with the attorney that you have to sign, what you're doing is you're signing over power of attorney to them to represent your legal person. Well, so many of these organizations are claiming to do something with your legal person, like move it back to the states of the union where it's supposed to be, or whatever the case may be.
Right.
But if they're not having you fill out a power of attorney, guess what they can do for you? Zero. Absolutely nothing. So that should be marker number one right there. And unfortunately, there's groups out there that charge hundreds or thousands of dollars to do like a status correction, but they never have you sign a power of attorney giving them the authority to do anything legally for you or even lawfully for you. So if they are not in a representative capacity that has been granted to them by you, then guess what? No, there's nothing that they can do. You understand what I mean?
Yeah. So declaring a resident or whatever is just is not even worth the ink that on. It's not even worth what's written on it.
Right. Right. But people, I mean, people are declaring their residency all the time. They're signing things all the time that are declaring that, that they're a resident of a county or a town or, whatever the case may be.
Right.
I mean, that's another one of those words that you can break apart legally. Look at the legal definitions. Break apart res ident. Ident, you're identifying. What are you identifying as? As res. Res is property of a trust. So if you're claiming to be a resident, you're declaring that you are property of a trust. And you're not even claiming a position within that trust.
We
And
do it all the time, though, right? Like, let's say you want to order from Amazon and they ask you for your address. You just declared you're a resident of, in your case, it's Florida, and in my case, it's Maryland.
Yeah. And the line where you're signing might even say residence, underneath the line. Like residential address or something like that. But I think people should break those words apart. I mean, another really common word that a lot of people hear all the time is the term significant other. Who is your significant other? Well, why would you even have a significant other? Do you go out and find a new girlfriend, or are you out looking for a significant other? Are you marrying a wife or a husband, or are you getting hitched to a significant other? I mean, significant other is really in the ballpark of how our mind even thinks. But if we break these words apart, like breaking apart the word resident, break apart significant. But what does that word consist of? First part of significant is SIGN, sign.
Oh.
And then if. And I can't. Say, sign if I can't. So that's what your significant other is here for. They're there to sign if you can't sign. because you have supposedly a legal or lawful relationship with them.
So, like, if I'm in the hospital and I'm unconscious and they need to sign a waiver or something, and I can't, they'll make her sign it.
Yeah, exactly. Provided it's a husband or wife, or it is an immediate family member. Those are your significant others. Now, your significant other may not even necessarily be your wife or your husband. It might be your mom, your dad, it might be your brother or your sister if your mom and dad aren't around. Well, those become your significant other. They're there to represent you on your behalf, much like an attorney does. And that's why I say I don't really need one, because I don't want anybody to represent my behalf, because I represent my A half.
Oh, okay, Ahab.
Yeah, right. They want to represent you on the B half. Well, what are you doing with the A half? But anyway, I think it's just interesting to look at some of the wordplay that's used. There's a couple of hands that were up, and for some reason it's not letting me go to chat. So anybody had a question or a statement, feel free, because I've got everybody unmuted right now.
What about subscriber? You're below the scribe.
Look up a leak project, Rex Bear. You can read that leak project. Check him out. That's my advertisement. Yeah, same thing. Subscriber. Subscribe. That are subbing in for you.
Yeah, see, a lot of this, what you were talking before, Brian, about the cults, a lot of it's just centered around anxiety, I think. And if you there's a new book called The Psychology of Totalitarianism, and here's one piece of the book. It says mass formation is largely the result of individuals being gripped by a common narrative that unites them in a heroic battle against anxiety. So I think that's a lot of what this is. Just you're playing off of our fears and our lack of knowledge.
Yeah, that's where anxiety comes from. It comes from fear. And if you're a reader of scripture, scripture says, fear not, 365 times. You're told every day, fear not. And then you turn on the television set and you pump your head full of fear.
Do you think the Patriot community is a cult?
Absolutely.
Does it fit the criteria of a cult that you were talking about earlier?
I believe it fits the criteria of a cult on more of a mass scale, on a social engineering scale. And if you go to the heart of patriot, what does patriot mean? Pa is father, and triot means that you're basically back to that word from Merriam-Webster's dictionary, adherent. You're adherent to your father, or you are a respecter of your fathers, or you look up to your fathers. And scripture tells you, call no man your father. And then on top of it, one of the first things you come into with the patriot community is a lot of talk about the founding fathers. And what the founding fathers were doing, they were all really committing treason against England, and they were trying to create a nation on their own. At first, that's what it was appearing like. But then as we go on, if we keep learning, you'll see that really what was being done is all of this, even though it looked like it was being set up, as anti-Great Britain, it was actually something that would help Great Britain, because it was ultimately something part of Great Britain. There never was a true separation. Just like the Protestants never totally separated from the Catholic Church. The separatist movement died away, but the Protestants are still around. And what are they doing? Protestant, you're still protesting. It doesn't mean you've left, it just means you're protesting. It just means that you're a 3-year-old on the floor kicking and screaming, and mommy and daddy are going to send you to your bedroom without dessert. I mean, that's all that boils down to.
But even that is being claimed under a lot of patriots, which is that we're still under England. We're technically English citizens, masqueraded as the so-called U.S. citizen.
Right. Right. And if you
Even
go,
today,
yeah, even today, you go to the peace treaty that supposedly ended the Revolutionary War that was written in France. And by the way, I'd recommend to people look up how many nations have signed their treaties in France. Every war, practically, has been ended with a treaty being signed in France. But you look at the Peace Treaty of France, and you read the first couple paragraphs in there, and it says that the King of England is still the arch treasurer and elector of the United States of America. That doesn't sound like somebody you've separated from, does it?
but like still like that even today in 2022.
Yeah, everything is done according to their, as long as they're happy with it. If they weren't happy with it, you'd hear about it. And I'm sure their people are even still here in the background directing the directions that things go in, much like it was at the time of the Constitution, 1789. You had Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin spent more time in France and in England than he spent in the United States of America. If that were to happen today, they would look at him like Donald Trump. He was teaming up with the enemy. Instead of saying the Russians, it would be France and England. The people you're trying to get away from. People don't realize the flag of Great Britain, the Union Jack. Where the term Union Jack came from was that the king wasn't just king of England; he was king of France also at the same time. That was your union. So if you saw somebody that was, the first postmaster general, he had signed all of the great documents that formed the United States. And so wait a second, this guy is behind all of this stuff, and he's spending all his time in France and England. What's going on with this guy? There'd be some more looking into him. A situation like that there'd be no possibility of Benjamin Franklin's situation existing today in this modern era.
We're all English.
It'd just be too obvious.
Charles is the one who controls everything in here.
Beg your pardon?
Is Charles the one who's controlling everything in the U.S. then?
I wouldn't say directly, no. In fact, there's a lot of people that are pointed at as being the control groups or whatever. Let me tell you something. If you are the controller of something like the USA, which was termed the Great Experiment, you wouldn't want to be seen. You wouldn't be front and center. Nobody's going to know your name. You wouldn't want anybody knowing your name. Because when people got upset, they'd be grabbing their pitchforks and their torches, and they'd be storming your palace. And you wouldn't want that. So, no, you're really not going to know the names of the real players.
I mean, I heard BlackRock and Vanguard, but they never tell who controls those.
Right. It's done through all of their other little organizations that, they have their tentacles into. They're having all of them take care of little small aspects of this or that. But there's not one hand that is micromanaging everything. It's letting a bunch of its people that are in the forefront go ahead and take care of the management.
Not one hand. So absolute autocracy doesn't exist, in your opinion?
Not nowadays. No, an autocracy couldn't. unless you're in a situation, say like maybe like North Korea or whatever, where you've got one person that has total control. Even in a situation where one person has total control, you're not going to see them in every little aspect of a functioning company. How many workers at McDonald's back in the day actually ever saw Ray Kroc? Well, they definitely didn't see him every day they went to work. In fact, the majority of them never saw him at all. But he was the autocratic ruler of McDonald's.
Yeah, like our mayors. Where the hell are they?
Yeah, they're in the background. They're just there to basically sign a waiver, sign a piece of paper, giving people the authority to do things.
They never give a speech, though. I don't even know if they're there.
You know, I had somebody I talked to earlier today, and it was pretty interesting. They were shocked to find out that in their town, and I believe their town only has maybe 800 or 1,000 people in it, and their town has its own big fire station, and they found out that underneath that fire station is basically a whole big rec center, kitchen, bedrooms, showers, workout room, all of that stuff for people to live down underneath the fire station. And all they have there really are volunteer firemen. And that because they had built this underground, that now they wanted to hire some full-time firemen that can live down there and basically maintain everything and keep it up. And it's like, oh wow, this little one stoplight town has its own bunker underneath the fire station, and nobody in the town even knows about it. But well, anyway, this is just something I wanted to bring up this evening, about cults, and look at the main things that establish a cult. They all have a leader, they all have a doctrine or a dogma, and then they've got some form of mandatory membership that they can control, that not even you have that much control over. And that word right there, control, lays over everything. So whenever you're involved with something and you see these elements existing, and then you see how they're treating people within it, and maybe even the direction they're trying to move things in, you need to keep your eyes open. You keep your head on a swivel and paying attention to what might really be going on in the background, because at the surface, you're never really going to see the full agenda. Thanks for being here, everybody.
Thanks, Ryan.
We'll see you guys next Sunday. And like I try and inform everybody of every week when they want to learn where to start, what should I do? There's three main things everybody needs to know. You need to know who you really are, where you're really from, and where you're really at. Because your identity is constantly going to be tried to be taken or stolen from you and changed into something else. Even if it starts with something as simple as a pronoun. Good night, guys.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks.
Bye.